Welcome to the video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the latest version of the X160 from DYS. I need to say a very big thank you to DYS for sending us this to try. We've already had a look at the first two iterations of this. We looked at the very first version when that first came out. That was CC3D based and it flew okay. It had a couple of little problems and the arms were a little weak. They addressed a lot of those considerations with the version 2, which is what we have here. Now we've been flying this version 2 and really enjoying it. A couple of little things on this. This was kind of a Nazi 32 based flight controller and it performed quite nicely. The only thing it was missing was some feet. So we 3D printed some of those for this one and it's been working fine. They've obviously continued to listen because now we have a brand new version with some really cute new features. So what I'd like to do is take it out of this box and get it set up and see what it's all about. Now, in here it opens up very similar way. We have the manual, we have a battery strap and a set of props and a set of spares, which is very handy. We have this FPV antenna. This is the only part of the kit I'm not particularly impressed with. These aren't very good. I think you just get yourself something like the Ionway antennas that we were looking at on the other machine. They're actually really good and they work spectacularly well. So with that aside, once you take the model out, there it is. You have the legs that you can attach to the bottom, so we'll do that. That's a great addition in my humble opinion. Some extra screws and also the connector to connect up the flight controller to your receiver. Now the changes on this, and you can already probably spot a couple of them. The flight controller now is an SP3 an F3 based flight controller, so it's going to run Cleanflight and other things, but it's going to run it much better than a Nazi 32. It's on a very, I don't know if you can see that properly, very wobbly mount, so that should hopefully help with vibration. Another of the big changes and additions is this little black box up here. This is an on-screen display. Now I'm really interested to see what the performance of that is, because I quite like on-screen displays. It's interesting what information we're going to get back. Has the integral FPV transmitter at the back, just like we've always had before, where the controls here set both the band but also the frequency that you're using. But the really cool thing, if you can just pick up that extra little switch down there, that switches it between 20 milliwatts and full power, which is fantastic. Finally, a little quad that we can fly around and be legal with when we want to be. Great. So before we stop and actually stick these things together, because I'm going to pop the legs on and also start to wire it up as well. It's an XT60 connector for the battery, which is great. We've got loads of little batteries that will do the job. And again, in those other two videos that I mentioned, we've already looked at the kind of batteries that will work quite well. I tend to use kind of the 850 style. They seem to work quite nice. In terms of wiring this thing up, the connector for the RC inputs is this one here, just by the side of the USB cable. Now we will be connecting it up when we come back in a minute, where we're going to connect it up to Cleanflight and see if it's happy. This cable that comes with all the connectors on the end plugs into that port there. So that's how it goes together to connect your RC ins. Because it's an STM-F3 based flight controller, it'll support S plus PPM and PWM. We're actually going to set it up with an old AR6100E, a little Spectrum device, and I'll show you how to put it together. There is a little wrinkle. Just like with the others, all of these wires, or all these connectors, only have one wire on, apart from one, which is called pitch. And the challenge is here is you've got to try and figure out which of these three cables is the negative, so which is the signal, so that you plug it the right way into your receiver. Now the way you have to do this is pop the cable into the side of the flight controller. You need to get yourself your little ohm meter. You just undo all the cables, stick it onto resistance, and then what you need to do is put it on one of the probes on the frame where it's negative, and on the top it says positive and negative, so just pop it on there. And then on that connector with the three wires, you want to put it on the top, and you're looking for that, which is a dead short. That is the negative pin. So make a note of that and keep track of it, because you need to plug in the right way. So let's plug that one in while I remember which is negative. So once we've figured out which is the negative pin, it's just a case of plugging it in. So this first one is called pitch. Pitch is elevator. So we're just going to plug that onto the elevator pins, right, making sure it's the right way round. Then the next one we found is throttle. We'll plug that into the throttle channel. Again, make sure that the signal pin is in the right position. Then the next one I find is roll. Roll is aileron. So we'll pop that in there. Nearly finished. Then we've got channel 5 and channel 6. And we've also got yaw. Yaw is rudder. We'll plug yaw into the rudder pins. And then channel 5 and channel 6 we can play around in a second, but I'll just guess those because one of those will be used for changing things like the mode. So we'll just pop them on for now and we'll see what we do when we get to Cleanflight. So now we have everything connected up. So now we've got that set up, let me put it all together. Let's come back, fire up the Cleanflight and have a look at what we can see. So we've got the model all plugged together. I've just plugged in a very simple little antenna here, nothing particularly clever. I've got rid of the one that came with it because, as I said, that's not very good. This is just a simple little whip one. It's actually a Fat Shark antenna, but it'll do fine while we're testing. All I've done here is I've popped the legs on. I've also popped the little 853S battery in, and I've made that little receiver kind of fit in the back, which is the little gap that's for it. Plugged the USB cable in the side and I've plugged it into the computer. Now if you're going to plug this into the computer and you're going to play like this, then definitely go and watch the Seriously Pro series. We talk about how you set this up. This flight controller, if you have things like Zadig drivers and things on your machine, won't like it. So go and have a look at those videos. Make sure that you're all set up. What you have to do is go and download Cleanflight, and once you've got Cleanflight and started, then you'll be able to connect to the model. So if we jump onto the computer, here's the Cleanflight interface. If I just inlay the image of the model itself, as I move the model around, you can see it moving on the screen. Isn't that cool? Now we need to just check then that everything is set up and working properly. At the moment we have no power or props connected. So first of all we can just reset the accelerometer. To be fair, it thinks it's pretty flat, so I'd probably get away with that at the moment. We'll look at the ports. So at the moment UART1 is set for MSP. That's absolutely fine. Configuration set for quadecs. Motor stop is turned on so it doesn't spin the motors when it's armed. That's fantastic. Minimum throttle 1130, max throttle 1850. It's set for parallel PWM, which is how we've got it. If you'd wired this up using a single cable, you'd set it for PPM or serial. And again, go and have a look at the setup videos for things like the Seriously Pro and the SP3 Mini on how you get that all working. The VBAT is set up, so that all looks absolutely fine. The only other thing that's set up is black box flight recording, nothing else is set. Cool, okay. In that case, let's look at the receiver. Let's power on the radio. And we also need to actually power the machine as well, because at the moment you'll see that there's no light on at the bottom, at the back for the receiver. So this is always an exciting time, the very first time we plug it in for power, and this is genuinely the first time we have. Okay, that's interesting. So we've burst into life, we've connected. If I now move the sticks like on the throttle, we'll see the throttle go up and down. Fantastic. If we move the yaw, that's working as well. If we move it across and we move the elevator up and down, great. Pitch is working fine as well, and I have a flight mode switch, which is auxiliary 1, which is happy as well. Great. Now what I would do here is I'd spend a little bit of time using your sub trims to get this to as close to 1500 as you possibly can, because what you really want to do is have it so that it's completely happy. If you find that you're using PPM or S-Bus and the controls on the radio are moving the wrong controls in here, then it's probably the channel map that you need to change. Okay, we are looking really, really good. So now that's all happy. I know it feels safe and level, and I know that all bits and pieces are working. We'll try and arm the board. Now again, because it's Cleanflight on the board, we hold this stick in the lowest right hand position. Let's see if that's going to work. And now we'll increase the throttle. Now that isn't arming, and that's probably because my endpoints aren't enough. If I go back into the receiver, you'll see at the moment, probably actually looking at it, the throttle isn't low enough. So I'm going to extend my endpoints just a little bit, and we'll come back and have a look at that, and hopefully that'll be working a little bit better. I think at the moment the challenge I've got is that it needs to probably go below that level in order for it to be happy. So let's stop the video there. Let me just adjust my sub trim so that these are 1500. Drop the throttle a little bit more, and then we'll come back and we'll also set up the modes too. Okay, we're back. So what I've done very briefly is I've just used my sub trims to get those middle values as close to 1500s as I can, and I've increased the low end of the throttle so that it drops below 1100. And now when I put the throttle to the lowest position right hand side, it now arms and then runs the motors. Brilliant. Let's disarm it. That looks really good. Last thing we'll do then, let's check what the modes look like before we pop the props on. So at the moment we have everything is angle. Now I actually have a couple of other modes set up here, so I can do other things. So I wouldn't mind having angle for when it is in the low position. When it's in the middle position, go for horizon mode. So I would save that. So now auxiliary ones, I move it around as it goes to the lower position. We're in angle. In fact, let me just do it like that. Then they're mutually exclusive. There we go. Bottom position is angle, and then any of the other switch positions for my mode, you see that little green thing flicking around, will give me horizon mode. And if I wanted to, I could actually have it so that we had rate mode at the very top. Now we have everything set, so we'll save that. We'll turn everything off. Let's attach the props and let's have a look at what that on-screen display looks like now we know it's all configured. So we'll test this. We've taken off the lens cap off the camera. We have got an antenna installed, and don't forget, whenever you're powering this thing up, you absolutely need to have an antenna installed. If you don't, you will break your transmitter. We have a couple of dip switches moved around. That should hopefully be the default Fat Shark position. Now I've got the camera pointing directly at my radio, so I'm going to record the video using my trusty Fat Shark Dominator V3s. I'm going to set up, let me just start the recording now. I'll power up and start the DVR. Now that should hopefully show us what everything looks like. Let me power it up. So this is the on-screen display. So there's the machine initializing, and there is the on-screen display. You can see it's MW-OSD version 1.6. There we have our main screen, and as you can see here we have disarm status. It has an artificial horizon, so as I tilt the model down, you can see that line moving up and down. Very nice. You can see the battery in the lower left hand position. In the right bottom position we have the amount of time we've been flying, and then we've got the mode that we're in as well. So let me just flick the mode switch, and we should see that mode change. See it in the top left hand corner, just where my finger is. So there we go, it's stabilized, and then that's horizon mode. And we can see it says accelerometer just here because that's the only sensor that it's actually using. That looks like we are ready to rock and roll. Okay, so now that's the case, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop the props on. That's what those extra screws are for. And then I think it's time that we take this out with the radio and the goggles and we give it a fly and see what it's like compared with its older brothers. So flying in a big field is a lot of fun. Because of the small size though, obviously, as it gets further away from you, it gets small really quick. The lack of nice large LEDs pointing forwards and backwards makes orientation a little bit tricky once you're about 20-30 feet away from you, but it flies beautifully. It's very stable. The new flight controller is doing a much better job and giving a much nicer feel. And with that Ionway aerial, it's working great for FPV. So let's talk about FPV for a minute. So the FPV camera at the front isn't the best in the world, but it works really well. Here's the view. We've actually recorded this on the DVR in our Fat Shark Dominator V3 goggles. So this is actually what I was looking at. I was looking at the front, and there's all the information on the screen. Now obviously you can change this by going into the menus and turning things on and off. I find that having a less cluttered on-screen display is better when you're learning, but I found for this it wasn't too bad. I tended to be looking through things like the artificial horizon, and it's hovering at about 55–60% throttle, so it could probably do with a little bit more power, but it's a very nice one to fly. If you're going to be buying one of these, I definitely get this version here, the version 3. Version 1 and version 2 in particular are still listed on places, and they don't have the additional improvements on this model. They don't have the on-screen display, and they don't have the STM F3 based flight controller that's flying here as well. It flies much better than the previous two versions, whereas with the previous two I felt like I was having to compromise. This one doesn't feel like that. There are only a couple little things I'll point out. In terms of the power switch for the video transmitter, then to the back position appears to be the high power setting, to the front position the nose seems to be the low power setting, and it came defaulted to the low power, which was nice. The other thing is the motors have just enough power for this. I'm running an 850 battery, that's probably as big as you dare, and the hover point is a little high, but it's flying nice, and it would work brilliantly as a little model to throw in your backpack to zoom around, or maybe as a model that you wanted to do as kind of an FPV trainer. The only other criticism I've got is about these legs. You'll notice we're missing a couple. Now this wasn't a particularly high speed crash, and the rest of the model was absolutely fine. I found it resting in the grass the right way up, powered up the engines, took off and continued the flight. However, it left one of its legs embedded in the ground, and the other one was holding on by a thread. So whatever these legs are made of, DYS needs to do a little bit more work on that. Now we do have our own sets of legs that are on Thingiverse, so if you have a 3D printer you can print them. I'm very tempted with this model to redesign an even better set to give you more stability in the air, because this is something that I am going to continue to fly. With the version 1 and the version 2, it was a nice model, but it wasn't something that I flew regularly. This one, with the way it flies, might be something that goes in the pack when I go out to fly at the field, because for FPV it's fantastic. So with those things in mind, just be careful about the weight of the battery. This 850 milliamp Nanotech Turnigy thing is probably the maximum battery size you can get away with. The motors and everything seems to work great, but that landing gear is just a little bit fragile. So be aware of that and be prepared to change it out if it breaks. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video. There are lots of other videos on the channel, and they're carefully ordered into playlists, so you may find that there are other videos on this same subject that you can go and watch. So I would recommend going into the playlist area of Painless 360 YouTube channel and looking around and seeing what there is. You never know what you might find. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and happy flying.